So a cyclist has knocked over a 5-year-old girl and then somehow successfully sues the father, which you'll find out how in this video. But first of all, if you're interested in these little stories and how the law applies, please do hit that like button and subscribe at any point if you find this video useful, or now if I'm being really cheeky to ask. So let's get into this story. This cyclist, wearing nearly all black with a yellow helmet, barges past this girl, appears to have his left knee sticking out, one might question whether that was intentional, and knocks over this 5-year-old girl. However, this whole ordeal was filmed by the father, who then posts this story, or this video, online. This video then goes viral, and the cyclist gets a huge amount of backlash online, as you can well imagine. Now, despite the fact that the cyclist initially just rode off into the distance to just escape the situation, he was taken to court and he was found guilty of something called involuntary assault, which is also something I'm going to come back to. Now, despite being found guilty of involuntary assault and receiving a suspended sentence, the court said that he'd suffered already enough by the backlash on social media, and he was ordered to pay the token sum of €1 in compensation. Now, this is a bit of a clue as to where we're going with this whole story, and a little bit of a bugbear of mine, which we'll dig deeper into in just a moment. So despite being found guilty of involuntary assault and being made to pay €1 in compensation, a year later, the cyclist took the father to court for defamation, to say that the backlash against him has caused him significant damage to his reputation, and he has now successfully sued the father for defamation and breach of his privacy, despite being out in a public place. Now, many of you might say that this goes against a lot of what I say in my videos, and all of which I will explain in just a moment, so please hang tight. Now, the cyclist was asking for €4,500, which is just over £3,800, and the court appears yet to determine whether or not the father is going to have to pay this amount of damages to the cyclist, in the judgment saying that the court found that the father of the young girl, by publishing the video, had made a mistake. Now, you'll let me know what you think of that judgment in the comment section below, please. Keep it civil, but let's get a debate going, civilly. Now, why is this all sounding a bit strange? What on earth is involuntary assault, and why are we talking about euros? Because this case was not in the United Kingdom, if that hadn't become obvious by now. This case was taken to court in Verviers in Belgium, which I humbly suggest has resulted in a significantly different judgment and verdict than it might have done in the United Kingdom. First of all, we don't have something called involuntary assault. It is either intentional assault or reckless, but either way it's still an assault, and it only varies depending on the level of injury. If it's a very, very low level or virtually no injury, then we would call that a common assault. If there was a more severe injury, we would call that assault occasioning actual bodily harm, or a Section 47 assault. If it's a much more serious injury, we would call it a grievous bodily harm, but it's still a form of assault. And all sorts of other consequences flow from that. But we don't call it such a thing as involuntary assault. We might say that it was reckless, in that somebody recognized that there was a risk of something happening and they carried on anyway. For example, in this case, if the cyclist were riding along in a dangerous way with his knee sticking out and hit the little girl and knocked her flying, that would be reckless. And so that would be assault by reckless behavior. Or if you're being less charitable, which I suspect is probably the case here, if I can go out on a limb and say I think the cyclist was doing that deliberately, because it was a shared pathway, clearly. The cyclist had his knee out as he was going past the little girl. So I would venture on a less charitable estimation and say I think he did it deliberately. But then we come on to how on earth did he manage to sue the father for defamation? Because let's have a look at what would happen if that was in the UK, based on our defamation laws. Now, first of all, if we get over the test for defamation in the first place, which is serious damage to someone's reputation, which is causing serious harm, even if that is the case here, and even if it did get over that hurdle, one of the defences, which you'll know if you watched any of my videos or any of our videos on the art of law by now, is that a defence to defamation is truth. You could argue that it was substantially true. So, first of all, just backing up a stage, we would have this argument in court as to what is the meaning conveyed by what is the statement which caused the defamation in the first place. Now, if that statement by way of a video was to say that the ordinary meaning of the interpretation of the video is that he's a bad person because he's knocked over this girl, then the video will speak for itself. And the likelihood is the defence of truth is going to stand here. Because if that is the meaning understood by a reasonable viewer, i.e. this is a terrible cyclist, he's a nasty cyclist, or he's reckless cyclist, or anything like that, it is certainly not a stretch of the imagination to argue that that was true. Because in the video, he was filmed riding past this girl and knocking her over with his knee. And even if the meaning was misunderstood by a few people, the mere fact that they've had the opportunity to see the video themselves, they can form their own view, so they are not reliant upon what the father said or implied by publishing the video. But then how about the implications of the breach of privacy? Well, this happened in a public place. Now, on the one hand, there are European cases that have held that if you publish something on social media, it is no longer exempt for being a wholly household activity. However, there are other principles at play here, such as the public interest. Is it in the public interest to show that someone has been riding in a dangerous way, and to further educate the public as to this is how you should not ride and knock over a 5-year-old girl? All of which, when it comes down to it, is a balancing exercise between the right to privacy, which there's no automatic right to privacy, certainly not in a public place against other individuals, against the public interest of publishing that material in the first place. For example, somebody driving their car badly on a public road in the United Kingdom, they might argue that they have some right to privacy, even though they're in a public place, because they might be identifiable if they are filmed. However, that will be balanced in any scenario against the interest of publishing that video in the first place. And more often than not, because they're in a public place, that right to privacy is not really likely to prevail. It really depends on the circumstances. If, on the other hand, they were walking into a certain type of clinic and it was deemed that they should have a reasonable expectation of privacy in those circumstances, that might be very different. But riding your bike or driving your car in a public place and either colliding with a person or colliding with a vehicle, that is not likely to win here. So the takeaway from this video, which comes back to a bugbear of mine, at least when I was studying law some years ago, are the distinct differences between the way European courts apply the law to how the courts of England and Wales might do so. And in my view, the courts of England and Wales would have reached very different decisions than the one in Belgium. With all respect, but I hope you found that interesting. Please do bop the like button and subscribe on the way out, and I thank you for watching.